Thank you very much, Misha. Hopefully you hear me well. Unfortunately, I'm outside of Minsk at the moment, and with a little bit limited access to internet. But anyway, I'm really happy to participate in this Our Common Baltic course. For me, it's also a bit of personal issue because I've been a participant of Our Common Baltic, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, or quite a long time ago, when it was had a chance also to sail on Amalia on Stockholm archipelago. And I think it was for me one of the really most important like professional trainings I've got, and especially inspirational trainings. So really happy to participate here and to contribute a little bit with information about plastic, as Misha said. Because we in CCB are really trying to work a lot on plastic pollution and on single-use plastic issues. As Misha said, we had a number of projects in CCB with a very, I think, nice name, Plastic Free Baltic, and then it was a Plastic Free Ocean. And we've been trying to work a lot in different countries across the Baltic to organize public engagement for minimization of single-use plastic and in general to raise awareness about this issue. I think it's really one of the most urgent and let's say personal problems which we might see or face in our daily lives currently. And when I'm making presentations in different occasions about plastic, I like to show several pictures which were taken personally in different countries. For example, it's one of the quite recent photos from Minsk, from one of our biggest markets. And you can see, I think, very typical picture for many countries when you have almost every product which we buy will be packed in a certain type of plastic. It could be like PET bottles, it could be sachet, it could be different containers for food. But what unites almost everything which you could see on this photo is that basically it's designed for landfill. So this plastic will not be recycled, will not be reused, but it will go to landfilling, or, well, depending on the country, it might go also for incineration. It's another picture taken in Gdansk, actually. Hopefully, we'll not see such type of picture soon in many cafes, but unfortunately now it's still quite a typical picture when small restaurant, small cafe will serve food in certain type of in certain type of plastic packaging, unfortunately, even despite the fact that we have a new plastic strategy in the European Union, which basically prohibits to use certain type of plastic. Also, it's just a kind of introduction. 2 years ago, we made a very big mobile exhibition about plastic generation, mainly for Belarus, of course, and we were doing interactive stands to actually illustrate what is a division between waste generation, for example, 40 years ago in Belarus and now. And we tried to illustrate it visually with different types of waste which were popular, for example, in 70s, and which are popular now. And I think that this picture would be also typical for many countries, because, for example, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, you would most probably find in your recycle bin different types of paper and different types of aluminum cans. You would find, of course, some glass. You would find a little bit of plastic in terms of, for example, toothbrush or some certain type of like multi-use products, but you would never find so many single-use bottles, single-use bags, containers, and etc. And when we look now, and for example, again, we did a number of waste audits in different cities or settlements in Belarus, and they know the same data from basically from other countries as well. And we find mainly plastic wrapping, plastic bags, plastic different types of packaging, and unfortunately most of them are single used. And when we analyze the data about waste generation over the past several decades, we see that we have a basically tremendous increase in waste generation per capita. In Belarus, it's more than 3 times, and I guess that in many other countries, the number will be almost the same. Maybe many of you know that in 2017 there was a basically first very big report about plastic generation, plastic use, which was published in scientific journals, and we adopted quite a lot of information from the study. For example, we know now that annually annual production of plastics is about 400 million tons. So it's quite significant amount. But what is more worrying is actually that almost 1/3, 36% of this amount is plastic packaging. And it's mainly single-use material which we use in our food production, in our different trade system, and they're mainly designed for like immediate use and immediate disposal. And this is actually very worrying. When we look on other types of sectors with plastic, we see a lot of textile, for example. We see a lot of construction materials, different consumer goods, and etc. And actually, I would also just very briefly touch textile, because I think it's also another important sector which has a direct connection to people, to consumers, because of course everyone wear clothes, and most of these clothes contains microplastic, microfibers. And I know that many of our colleagues in CCB, for example, Bund, they do a lot of studies and a lot of work to raise awareness about microfiber pollution in Germany and how to address this issue. I think it's a kind of a also emerging topic within the big plastic discussion. But of course, packaging waste and packaging plastic is perhaps more well, it's more urgent at the moment and gets more attention. When we look on this packaging waste, as I said, about 1/3 of the whole annual plastic generation, it's approximately 140 million tons. Of course, it's it's a statistics. So in reality, this number could be much higher. And especially this is the data from 2016. So we expect that production of plastic, packaging plastic would increase since 2016, and especially, unfortunately, during this COVID times, the use of single-use packaging even more increasing because of many safety regulations in some countries, or at least attempt of industry to use these times to push back for single-use plastic. For me, it's actually very, I would say, very worrying figures which are presented in these graphics, because it shows that basically everything, well, 86%, it's almost the whole amount of plastic is being disposed or incinerated, which is a relatively small share of this amount, and only 14% is recycled. And from this 14%, only 2% is being effectively recycled, meaning that basically we receive the same type of product. It's not downcycled as in majority of processes. Because again, unfortunately, downcycling is very typical in this area, and we almost never receive the same type of products. For example, the same type of PET bottles when we recycle PET bottles, and it's only not in all countries actually recycled PET is allowed for continuous use in food industry, for example. So the picture is actually very, very negative, and I think this is why we have so much attention currently to the topic of plastic and plastic pollution. And just recently, there was a big conference, United Nations Environmental Conference on marine litter and plastic pollution of ocean, and the main result that most probably there will be a decision in the next United Nations Environmental Governing Council to start negotiations about an EU convention on plastic pollution. Hopefully it will be a decision made next spring. And then we will enter into a new negotiation process about how to organize this convention. And of course, I think these figures are also one of the most important backgrounds for many countries to start their own national or regional programs to deal with plastic pollution. It's a little bit more figures, but basically all these figures illustrate the same trend, that we have an increase, very significant increase in plastic waste generation over the last number of decades. And what is also interesting is that within this increase of plastic waste generation, we see the biggest increase in types of plastic which are clearly associated with packaging. Plastic, for example, PET, polypropylene, polyethylene, polystyrol. So these types of plastics which are mainly used for packaging. Well, and it's I just like this illustration. Basically, it's again about the same, that almost everything is being dumped in landfills. Relatively small share is being incinerated, which is also I would say a bit controversial from environmental point of view, because of releases, because of loss of energy in a way. But on the other hand, many of plastic products and plastic packaging are actually designed in a way that it's not possible to recycle them. So many countries choose incineration, and a small piece is being recycled. What is also interesting, working in CCB or in CCB member organizations with the topic of plastic, we're trying to find some connections between people and plastic, because of course we can talk a lot about general plastic pollution, about ocean pollution, etc. But we find that for many people, it's very important to have a kind of a personal touch to the problem. When they understand that something what they do in the ordinary life, when they go, for example, to do shopping or to buy some clothes, has an impact, has a relation to a more wider environmental problems. And for example, topic of single-use plastic bags is something which from my point of view, has a kind of a connection to our daily consumption habits. And here we can find some, well, I think interesting figures about consumption of plastic bags worldwide scale. And for me, it's very, again, very interesting figures that average active lifetime is only 12 minutes of single-use bag. It's data from Greenpeace International. And when we compare this average active lifetime with the actually time needed for degradation, it's well, it's a big difference. And when we look on recycling rate, basically the relation between number of bags which are being recycled and number of bags being dumped or incinerated. Here the proportion is even more challenging than in general for packaging plastic, because it's only basically less than 1%, 0.5% of bags are being recycled, and it's mainly even not because of technical problems to collect, to separate these types of plastic, because there is no economic background for doing it, because the raw material is actually more cheaper and more and has more high quality than this recycled bags, and associated environmental problems. I'm sure you're aware about the situation with plastic pollution in Southeast Asia, in China, in Thailand, in Burma, and some other countries. It's so basically the associated environmental costs are so high that many countries, again including China, for example, they implemented a ban for import of plastic waste from other countries. And in fact, this decision to a significant extent undermined the already existed system for plastic recycling in many European Union countries, in the United States, because even this small percent of recycling, which we saw in previous slides, like 12% or 9%. To a large extent, this recycling percent was based actually on possibility to export plastic waste to Southeast Asia for a kind of recycling. And now it's even more challenging, and I think that's why incineration of plastic waste is becoming more and more popular, because simply in many big cities there is no other option. And I think for us it's a very important time moment when we can more and more speak about waste prevention, about changing the narrative in general, because the situation, I think, clearly shows that we cannot really cope with the with the amount, with the speed of placement of single-use plastic on the market. So we have to change the situation quite dramatically, I would say, and to change our attitude to packaging, to change our economical policy to promote more multi-use products in comparison with single-use. And basically, that's what is. I think it's an attempt in the current EU plastic strategy and EU Green Deal to address these issues. On the slide, you see this so-called pyramid of waste disposal options or methods, which is in fact adopted in European Union, and I think currently it's a kind of a global approach, at least a theoretical approach to waste management practices and also plastic waste practices. And you see that the most preferred option is prevention. So in terms of plastic, it would be multi-use products, which would prevent formation of a significant amount of single-use plastic waste. And the least preferred is basically trashing, landfilling, when we completely don't use the energy value or the resource value of the products. Waste incineration is also one of the, I would say, least preferred options. So it's here under as a recovery, including energy recovery, because this option is also associated with quite high environmental costs and environmental challenges, at least in many cases. When we look on data from UNEP in 2018, they published very, I think, very good comprehensive report about different types of single-use plastic, single-use plastic pollution, and they did global research among governments to find out what types of single-use plastics are the most concern for different national governments. And he would find two types: the thin plastic bags and containers for from poly. From plastic, which is basically very difficult to recycle, and in most countries it goes directly to landfills. I think this is the reason why in so many countries these products are to some extent currently under discussion for banning or for strict for implementation of strict measures to control these types of plastic. And again, for us, I think in the CCB, what we're trying to do is to, on the one hand, to promote plastic prevention. And of course, we're doing a lot of activities on public level to show to public why it's important to choose products which would have a positive impact on plastic prevention. And basically, it's possible to do a lot in our daily life to change our habits to some extent, to do shopping with not to use single-use plastic bags, a lot of other things. And I think it's very important to show this type of opportunities or alternatives to public, to children, to school children, to use and to make it actually popular to use more environmentally friendly alternatives. Of course, the situation differs in different countries, and because CCB is working in a whole range of countries around the Baltic Sea, the tendencies and situation, for example, in Sweden or in Germany, differs from the Eastern Baltic countries, where we have to push more for environmentally friendly alternatives. And here is a kind of a very brief illustration of plastic prevention approaches which we could in different countries to implement plastic prevention approaches within the retail sector, for example. And there is a number of reports. If anyone is interested to learn more, we can share much more reports about examples how industry is implementing already voluntary measures in retail industry, is implementing voluntary measures in many sectors to reduce single-use industrial packaging or single-use packaging within the retail sector. I like example of Tesco in UK, which basically encourage consumers to bring their own containers. And the situation differs quite significantly, for example, from what we see in again in Eastern Baltic countries, where in some cases it's prohibited to bring own containers because of sanitary measures. Because the shop is not allowing you to bring your containers because something might happen with the food. And it clearly, for me, illustrates different approaches. The same in, well, we have again many examples in Germany, for example, when this DECA network chain of shops, they use laser to make labeling on the products and not to use plastic like plastic labels on organic products, which is, I think, also important and interesting example of how well creative retail shops could be if they really want to reduce plastic labeling. And basically, when we analyze tendency and trends in the sector, we see that more and more large retailers, they're trying to encourage consumers to use reusable plastic alternatives. And basically, they're trying to reduce also packaging through the whole chain. And for us, I think it's very interesting to promote some of these examples within different countries, because again, it's not a mandatory regulation; it's more a kind of a at the moment voluntary measures in different retail chains around the world. As we said previously, we had a number of projects in CCB, which were specifically addressing the topic of plastic, and like our flagship projects were Plastic Free Baltic and Plastic Free Ocean, in which we were trying to during the Plastic Free Baltic to work more with microplastic pollution. And we, for example, introduce a system of voluntary public monitoring for microplastic in water objects, and we did quite a lot to raise awareness about microplastic, and especially microplastic in cosmetics in many countries around the Baltic Sea. And in frame of Plastic Free Ocean project, we our main effort was to support implementation of the EU plastic strategy, and we were trying to support national measures in I think it was 7 or 9 countries participating in this project. National measures to reduce single-use plastic items. And also we did a lot of informational activities, awareness raising campaigns. In some countries, we also touched the topic of toxic chemicals which are associated with the plastic pollution, because it's another big topic. It's not only like the direct environmental pollution of plastic, but unfortunately, in many cases, plastic pollution will also lead to contamination by toxic chemicals, because it could be chemicals containing in, for example, paints which are used in plastic, or they can absorb chemicals from water and then basically you transmit them to the distances and other locations. So it's quite another important topic. I can just briefly show several slides about what we did in frame of the project. If anyone wants to, I don't know, to use project materials or to read more about reports from the project, they are available on CCB website under the Our Common Plastic-Free Ocean page. But as I said, mainly we were working with promotion of voluntary measures to phase out plastic. We were advocating for policy changes, and we were working with public to increase awareness raising and literacy on measures to prevent plastic pollution. Number of pictures. I think in most of the countries, our local partners and NGOs, they were working a lot with public, organizing different public events, and trying to engage people to change their consumption habits. But also, what is interesting, many partners have been working with local authorities, local municipalities, to support them in changing the habits and measures, to implement new measures on municipal level to reduce plastic pollution. So you see a number of results, or at least it's kind of, for me, it's not really like a result. It's more a milestones for which were achieved by our partners in frame of this project. And of course, now we're trying to continue this work and to because again, the topic of plastic pollution is it's very magical now, and I cannot say that even with the EU plastic strategy, we changed the situation significantly. It's a kind of a forward-looking initiative, and I think that we really need to have more support to implement actually this strategy and to really reduce significantly this single-use plastic. I could just to finalize my presentation, I could briefly show several examples what we did in Belarus, because I'm based in Belarus, and we've been also working a lot, at least until the recent year, on plastic pollution. And when we compare the situation to our neighboring countries, basically I think everyone is doing almost the same by promotion voluntary measures. And for example, in cafe, we've been working with several cafe to make them plastic free. So they use, for example, metal straws. They don't use single-use caps. They encourage the consumers to bring their own cup. So we had a campaign, "My Cup, Please," when client receive 10%, 10 in some cases 15% discount when he or she goes with his or her own cup to the cafe. And actually, it was very popular in schools. It's another important target group, I think, for many NGOs to try to work with plastic pollution, because in schools and in general in educational organizations, the use of single-use plastic is quite high, especially when we're talking about the single-use caps. And it's also very important to start with, or to work with the educational sector, because when school children are used to basically using their daily life in school single-use plastic caps, then it's very difficult for them to absorb information about I think general plastic pollution. It's just as an example, we've been working with a voluntary the social canteen, which prepare food for homeless and poor people, and we also implemented with them a plastic-free approach. It was possible to rearrange some of the processes and to use, for example, metal table. It's called tableware, and to use a special cleaning system. Of course, on the one hand, it takes a little bit more time and and resources, but then when they calculated even the economic effect from getting away from buying every day a large number of single-use plastic tableware, it was more profitable for them to use a multi-use. In Belarus, we're working a lot with churches to promote plastic-free alternatives within the religion services, and so it's also an interesting target group for working with or to promote plastic issues. I can really show many examples from different countries, but again, I think everyone from our NGO community is trying to work on awareness raising, is trying to basically to be a speaker for changes, speaker to address the issue of plastic prevention, to try to promote different alternatives. And I think, again, I don't know all participants of this Our Common Baltic, but if you are interested to work more on plastic topic, you can address or you can cooperate with national CCB organizations who are doing quite a lot on this issue. Thank you very much. I would be happy to maybe to have a little discussion if anyone has questions or comments, or maybe you would like also to share some of your thoughts about what's going on with plastic pollution in your countries. Otherwise, thank you very much for your time and opportunity to present this information.